Welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu Outlet. I'm sitting down with a legend in Australian Jiu-Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu across the world, Mr. Kit Dale. How you doing?
I'm doing well, mate. Thank you.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you've got a new program that really dives into the principles and the game theory and the meta side of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm really excited to ask you about that and hear your take kind of on how to master Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But first, I want to ask you the same question that we ask everyone on this show, whether they're a white belt, a blue belt, or a legend like you. And that is, how has training in martial arts impacted your mental health since you started training?
Well, I think it's been great. I started off life as a very shy, timid, scared individual, and martial arts helped me gain confidence. Not just in walking the street, but just in my own ability to learn something and develop as well. I originally got into martial arts because I was playing Australian rules football, and I was getting really good at Australian rules football, but I was a lot smaller than what most of the adults were. I think I was 22 at the time, but I looked like I was 17, and I was petrified of any kind of violence. So I ended up looking for a martial arts school because I wanted to learn how to fight, because these guys were starting to hit me from behind the play. And then I found martial arts, and I think I did a couple sessions. It was with Rob Pumakovsky, and it was more of a Jeet Kune Do concept, where it was more about learning every facet of martial arts. And then we did one session in jiu-jitsu, and I remember looking at this kid, and I'm like, dude, I'm going to smash this little kid. It's going to be easy. And this guy just fucked me up, and I was like, okay, I need to learn this. This is good. This shit works. And then me and my cousin, Michael Shaw at the time, we started training together a lot. We're very similar size. I was probably more endowed than what he is, but we were training a lot. And I just continued to progress with it. And eventually I decided, you know what, I actually like this a lot more than football. I actually just got drafted to train with the reserves of St Kilda, which is a top AFL side. So I would have been trying to sort of push my way through the reserves into the senior squad on that. But I decided martial arts would be better for me because I get to see the world. So I followed that. And it was really good. That was the reason why I got to first travel overseas. I went to Abu Dhabi for the Blue Belt World Championships. So seeing another country was great. And just, like I said earlier, stepping outside my comfort zone helped me so much, because after doing what I did in jiu-jitsu, I was able to go into other areas of life and other hobbies or careers, and know that, you know what, I've done everything in jiu-jitsu, I can do the same shit in this. They say the same thing about wrestling, if you can learn to wrestle, you can do anything, And I think a lot of that played a part of that, and I felt just very confident in myself physically. I don't walk down the street anymore and see a guy and think, oh, what if this guy beat me up? I'm like, no, what if this guy has a gun? Maybe then he could beat me up. But I never have the other thing. I'm always like, well, I could probably do reasonably well. So it's just a thought I don't have to bother with. I'm never looking for fights or anything, but that helped a lot. And there was a lot of issues that I had as a child that the martial arts helped me with. Not only was I super shy, I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was like petrified when I used to play football. Before I got decent at football, I didn't even want to call for the football because I was worried that I would make a mistake with it, and I didn't want people to be watching me or anything. And stepping outside on in jiu-jitsu mats and at the world championships, you get used to that really quickly. So it definitely helped me a lot mentally, and just gave me the platform in which I use to develop skills in multiple things now. Like jiu-jitsu, for me, jiu-jitsu was a lot more of a hobby that I got really good at because of the way I trained jiu-jitsu and the way I looked at jiu-jitsu. I was never the type. I was never like a Gordon Ryan type that was like, I want to, dominate this sport forever and be the best person in the world. That was never me. It was more like, I really like this, and I want to see where I can go with it. And I think my first goal was like, okay, I want to be a black belt in 10 years. And then I saw BJ's Penn apparently did it in 3, which I found out wasn't technically 3 anyway. But I thought, well, yeah, maybe I can do it in 3. So I tried for 3, and I ended up hitting it at 4. But I was still only training 5 times a week in Australia mostly. So there wasn't, a lot of really good training back there. And a lot of the coaches, were still trying to figure out what jiu-jitsu was, and they were black belts. I mean, there was me and Lachlan Giles that were kind of coming up together, and a few others around that time. And Craig was a little younger, and he was sort of progressing, but we didn't really train with him much until we were at black belt, and then he started just, destroying everyone. He was doing really well, and then we all got together. But I don't even know how I got into that subject, but I started training with that, and progressing with that. Just it really helped me in every area of life. Like I know, well, I can do whatever it is I want now, and I'm doing the same thing with filmmaking now, which is a lot of fun. And I just, the same confidence I got from knowing how to learn jiu-jitsu really quickly, I can put it into anything. And that's the cool thing about the model of learning that I was very lucky to stumble upon, is it allows me to learn anything at a much faster pace than what most people do. And it's not because I'm any smarter than anyone else. It's just because most people are unfortunately learning things the wrong way. We're designed or wired or evolved to learn a certain way, and we kind of drift off. And then the industrial age model of education takes us, and then we start trying to overthink things and over control things and slow everything down initially.
What I'm hearing is with jiu-jitsu, it almost gave you this life of adventure, basically. Like you got to travel, you got to, compete at the highest levels. Like, what did that do for your mental health? Like, what was that transition like, going from being a white belt all the way up to a black belt in a really short number of years, and then suddenly you're competing in the biggest tournaments like ADCC and, some of these other big events around the world? What did that do for you?
Well, it was really hard for starters because you don't have the same time that most people do of getting used to something. Where, remember when I was competing at the black belt world championships against, current world champions, they've been training for like 15 years. I've been training for like 4 years. And it was really hard at the start because I just didn't have that experience. I was good enough. I was really good, but I didn't have that same confidence that a lot of people had because of the years of doing that. Plus I didn't have world champions to train with. So I wasn't really sure. So a lot of time I would come out and I'd have the wrong attitude where I'd be, I'm going to see where I'm at with this guy. I'm going to test the waters out. And then by the time I realized, hey, I'm as good as this guy, it's sometimes too late. Sometimes I would win, but I was definitely underperforming at black belt. But I only really gave black belt competition 1 year. And then I kind of retired from competition. I still competed after a while, but it was more like, I was traveling through Italy for two weeks, and someone said, you want to fight Tommy Langaka? And I'm like, yeah, whatever, let's do it. And, I go compete and I beat him, but I mean, with no training, and I entered the world championships after, not training for 2 months or something like that. I would do that kind of stuff because I liked it and it was fun. It was a good step out of my comfort zone, but I wasn't approaching jiu-jitsu like I wanted to be the next, big thing. Otherwise I would have been preparing properly for that, but it wasn't that important for me. But what jiu-jitsu did help me with is it got me out of the fucking rat race of work. I hated work. Oh my God. I did every shitty job you can imagine. I feel like I've done. And I hated having to get up in the morning and having to work for somebody else, make them money just to make enough money to keep doing the same thing. And I was able to retire that in 2010 thanks to jiu-jitsu. So I started making enough money to be able to not have to work. And then and that was through mainly doing seminars and private lessons at that time. And then 2014, I released my first product in jiu-jitsu called The Art of Learning Jiu-Jitsu. And that went really well. And then financially, I was pretty good for a while. And I was able to not need to go work a job that I didn't want to do. So I could focus on other things that I wanted to do. And at the time, it was more move into acting. And I started doing that in 2015 till now. And after the pandemic, I decided to get more into writing as well and filmmaking. So it's definitely helped me a lot because now I can pursue things. Like, I write like 14 hours a day, and that's not a joke. That's how much time I spend like practicing my writing scripts and stuff like that, because I'm dead serious. Like, the things that I wanted to do in jiu-jitsu are nothing compared to what I want to do in film. And the challenge is so much greater in film. Jiu-jitsu is a very small niche sport that I was just, want to participate in and, test myself. But filmmaking, I want to leave a legacy of amazing films behind. So I'm putting 10 times more work into filmmaking than what I ever did in jiu-jitsu. But it's only because of jiu-jitsu can I even do that, because I don't have to go and work a full-time job and, what most artists do here, they've got to go bartend and, or, do whatever the hell they have to do to make money. For me, I'm very lucky that I have that. And, now with my latest product is going fantastic. I can get the best of both worlds. I can help people learn the way I learned and help people progress like I did. And I can also study new things and open up a new world that soon I will be hopping through the ranks with and making great movies we're all watching. Hopefully in 3 years' time, no one's ever going to ask me about jiu-jitsu. They're going to be asking me about the movies I'm making. That's the goal.
Right. Yeah, you're someone who's kind of transcended the sport, and that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you about it, because that's one of the big things that we talk about on this show is kind of how jiu-jitsu applies to other things in life. So I'd love to ask you about that. Like what principles from jiu-jitsu did you apply to acting? And I know that you've got a program that's kind of dealing with this sort of stuff about the meta of learning, the meta of mastery, really. I mean, that's kind of what I took away from watching some of the videos that I watched about your program, is that it's about how do you master something? So can you just talk a little bit about that? Like, what is your take on mastery there?
I think the first mistake most people make is they try and over-educate themselves. And we see this in every area. Like they try and read a whole, a bunch of books, or, watch a whole bunch of instructionals, and then they go out there and they try and copy the coach or what the person in the book wrote. I'm not the biggest academic when it comes to reading. I don't like it. I don't find it very interesting. I want to go out there and I want to do it. And I've always had that number one rule in jiu-jitsu. That's what I did. I wasn't interested in being told what to do. And it wasn't because I didn't believe they knew. It's because I wanted to figure it out myself. That was the fun of jiu-jitsu. For me, it was a way to learn how to problem solve dynamically in a sport or in an art that develops skills on multiple different ends. So when I first started, they were showing me techniques, and I just started kind of turning away from them. And I didn't do it in a very rude way. It was just more like, no, I appreciate that. I just want to try and figure it out myself. That was the way I like to approach things. Because the thing is, it's like if I've got a problem with my computer here, yeah, sure, okay, you can tell me how to fix it and stuff. But if I don't ever try and fix it myself, I'm never going to know when I have like multiple problems that keep coming up. But I'm not saying this is a great analogy, because most of the time no one cares enough about your computer. But for me, my jiu-jitsu, it's like, well, if I keep getting the answers, how am I actually going to figure things out myself? I'm going to be like learning mathematics by reading the back of the book, and when it comes to test day, I'm not going to have that back of the book there, and I'm going to be fucked. So what I try to do is I try to figure things out myself. And what happened is I started developing exponentially faster than what other people were that were training, 3 times, 4 times more than me. Yet I'm just going miles past it because I was figuring things out. I was learning through experience, through trial and error, and I was using a model of problem solving to solve the solutions in jiu-jitsu, which is what most people don't do. They just sit there and like, okay, they come to a class, tell me exactly, you're the coach, tell me exactly what to do. I'm going to just copy you. You've already done it. You know what to do perfectly. And I'm going to skip the steps, and it's going to make me, much better. It's like, no, you're not. You're not. You're going to make things way slower on yourself. You're going to be helicopter parented your whole time and wait for answers. So one thing that I use when it comes to learning anything is I use the same model. I got into writing, for example. Never read a script that I didn't have to. Some I had to for acting, okay, like once or twice where I got a big enough role that I'm like, hey, I need to read this whole script. I never read scripts. I never went to film school. I never learned anything like that. All I started doing was writing stories. And yeah, I made a lot of mistakes. I had to hit the ground running, and everything I did was wrong. I couldn't even spell at this stage. I literally couldn't spell, and I had the worst grammar. I put an exclamation point on the end of every single sentence because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. I didn't know where the fuck the commas are supposed to go. So it was a big learning experience. And the first time someone read my script, I guarantee you they had like, what is this shit? But what I kept doing is I just kept writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing and rewriting and rewriting. And eventually through doing that, I started figuring out the problems that I was having. And yes, I would send it to a lot of people and I would get a lot of feedback. And I'm very open to like understanding that like you have to suck at the start. You will suck at the start. And it's like, just forget about that. That's going to happen. Accept that really quickly and just move on. And allow yourself to be vulnerable in a sense that, with my scripts, a lot of people won't send their scripts to anyone. I'll let anyone read my script. I'll let anyone watch me train. I'll let that because I want to be judged. I want to be criticized because I want to try and fix the mistakes in my game. So I'm going to try and open myself up to exposing as many as I can so that I can fix more. So when I was writing scripts, I sent it out to everybody and I would get a lot of really good feedback. And trust me, so much of that feedback you don't want to hear. You don't, there's the last thing you want to hear is something you worked on for 6 months sucks, but it's necessary. And you just go through and you just fix it and fix it and fix it. So my rule with writing and what I got from jiu-jitsu is The only time I'll study writing is if I have absolutely nothing to write. And the good thing about writing is you always have something to write. So I barely ever study anything. And it's just, if I'm out and I'm walking and I can't write in my phone, then maybe I'll listen to something that, I can study. But my biggest thing is do the thing that you want to do, because so many people are trying to learn from you, and they're trying to read a book, and then they'll tell you they know everything. They'll read 15 different scientific textbooks, and they'll tell you they know everything about jiu-jitsu. I'm not going to be able to compete with you with the scientific literature. What I will do is I'll have the experience. I'll know firsthand how things work, and I'll use it practically all the time. So I'm all about hands-on stuff. So when it comes to learning something, I just go and do it, and I treat my new students the exact same way. Instead of what most people do when it comes to learning jiu-jitsu, where they come and they learn 3 different techniques and they're told to practice it and drill it over and over again and then try and implement it into training, what I do, which is different, is I create games for the students to play. The hardest thing about jiu-jitsu is most people don't know what they're doing wrong. And this is in life. Most people don't know what they're doing wrong, okay? And even if they do, they don't know how to fix it. But the good thing about creating games is what I do is I minimize the mass amount of variables that appear, especially in jiu-jitsu when you first start training. I mean, you're wrestling with someone and you're like, I don't know what the hell's happened, and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. We minimize a lot of that to a very small, fun game for them to play. And this could be you're starting in half guard, and all you're going to try and do is get this underhook, the same side underhook. That's all you're going to do. And the person underneath is going to try and do the same thing. So they know they've got a direct objective to do this, and it eliminates a lot of the variables that are going to confuse them. So they can sit there and focus on the problem and the task at hand and try and find a way to solve that, plus developing skill along the way. And then what happens, the good thing about it is you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but you get instant feedback. You learn straight away what is a mistake, and you get a chance, an opportunity to fix that mistake through experience. And it's far greater. It's like I can tell you, as a kid, don't touch the fire. But if you touch that fire, you're going to know, that memory is going to stick with you a lot more. So you end up having this, cycle of information that you're problem solving through. You assess the situation. You come up with a solution, you execute the solution, then you evaluate its success, and you keep doing that. And what happens is you're just gathering more and more and more and more information. And the memory in the brain works like a scaffolding system. At first, when you don't have any experience learning something, everything you hear goes through one ear and out the other. Even common terminology will go through one ear and out the other. You see new students when they're in a class and they're listening and they have no idea what the teacher's talking about half the time, and then they just zone out. But by creating an experience, by developing an experience, what happens is that scaffolding, that memory, starts building. And the bigger that information builds, the easier it is to apply new information. So basically, the more experience you have in a certain field, the easier it is to learn more in that field. Okay, and it just compounds bigger and bigger. So the better you get, the faster you can learn. That's why for me, like, you could show me any single movement and I'll be like, okay, I can do it straight away. And they'll be like, no, you need to drill it. No, trust me, I don't need to drill. I can see. For me, it's very easy to understand. I can also look at jiu-jitsu matches and break them down and see what everyone's doing right and wrong within a split second, because that's the way I learned things. So I create games and I get them to play, and they start developing skill. And not only are they developing skill, they're enjoying it because it's a game where they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and they're getting, feedback straight away. And then I just create more and more games. And then as they get better, I start making them a little bit more difficult. Okay, I start adding more variables, because at the start, you don't want to make it too difficult. Otherwise, they're never going to be able to find a solution, and they're going to be, bummed out and not want to do it. So I've got to find, it's just like weights. If you come to me like, kid, I want to get really muscular. Okay, what do? It's like, hey, I need you to do a certain amount of weights. Not too little that you're unaffected and your muscles don't need to evolve to deal with that, that pressure or that restraint. But if I give you too much, you're going to end up tearing a muscle and go backwards as well. So I need to find what is that, that fine spot. And then we just keep, as you get smarter, we lift it up. As you get smarter, we lift it up, if that makes sense. So I try and find problems that are good for their level, and then just keep bringing them up as they get better and better, adding more variables, and to the point where you get to my stage where it's like you don't need to do positional sparring really anymore, unless there's a new, very unique position that comes available that I want to work on. I can basically force any position while I'm rolling, while I'm wrestling, and learn it, myself with all the variables, because it's far more challenging for me and fun. But then we talk about what you were saying about mastery. which is a very different ball game, because mastery isn't, winning every single tournament in the world. It's not, beating your opponent. That's not mastery. Mastery is the refinement of efficiency in whatever you're doing. So let's say I could beat you. I'm not saying I can, but let's say I could beat you, okay, right, in wrestling. Does that mean I've mastered jiu-jitsu? No, it doesn't mean it. I can still go further and further and further. And someone who's a good example of this is Gordon Ryan. When you see him rolling with people, he's very efficient. He's not moving super slow. He's not using unbelievable power. He's just slowly and efficiently doing what he needs to do. And I've rolled with him, and it's so fun. It's so great. And it's so much to learn from someone like that. And I have a very similar approach, because that's the way I roll. I just don't have I don't put the same time into training. I'm older. I don't have the same desires. So it's good to see that, the way I look at jiu-jitsu is what kind of high-end potential it has through what he does. So I always tell people, like, when you're rolling with someone, don't, let's say you're at this level and I'm up here. I want to bring myself down to here. If that means, removing my energy and my strength, removing some of my speed and just going slower and trying to do things a lot softer, then that's what I'll try and do. And I'll try and master that. So every single time I'm rolling, I'm not trying to win. I am trying to win, but what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to do it in the most efficient way possible. And to do it in the most efficient way possible, you're going to need multiple things. You're going to need to have unbelievable posture and positioning, very good leverage. You're going to need to be very deceptive, because if your opponent knows what you're going to do, it's very easy to defend. Every single movement can be defended, okay? And if you're going against someone that's a low level, for sure, you can get anything to work on them. But as they get higher and higher than you need to be deceptive. Otherwise, they're going to defend it. So I don't want anyone knowing what I'm trying to do. Plus, you need to be able to read people. You need to be able to see I need to be able to look at you and predict what you are most likely going to do. If I can do that, then I can start countering it. So these are just some things, and just being aware of different things, like having an overall awareness. When I'm rolling with someone, I'm looking at how loose is their skin. Is their skin going to move a lot? How muscular they are, how fast they are, most likely going to be, what belt they are they wearing a gi, are they wearing no gi, what kind of mats are we on, are they sweaty, are they not, are they tired, are they not? And then when we're rolling, I'm looking at the way they're breathing, I'm looking at where their eyes are going, I'm trying to feel the way their muscles are contracting, because I'm trying to gather as much information as I can to make accurate predictions on what he's most likely going to do. And then I'm also on the other end trying to confuse him and disguise what I'm about to try and do. And that's the fun part for me when it comes to jiu-jitsu, because it's not just, for me, it's not about accumulating techniques, and it's not a choreographed dance. It's about becoming an unbelievably good problem solver that also uses psychological warfare to defeat their opponent. And that's why if I ever was going to read stuff, it'd be like stuff like Sun Tzu and very, methodical or philosophical stuff, rather than any kind of like technical approach to jiu-jitsu. But that's the way I try and approach everything. When it comes to whatever it is I'm learning, I'm trying to get everything as good as I can. Even with writing, I'm not just trying to write good stories. I'm trying to perfect my own writing. Even if I'm writing a line, I never have one word spill over. I'm always going to try and find a way to make it aesthetically pleasing. If I'm doing a movement, I'm trying to make it look, not just look, but trying to make it be as, efficient as possible. When we do that naturally. Like if you go to open your door 1,000 times, you're going to find very efficient ways to use your key and open your door. Most people are not going to do the hardest way of doing things. You're going to try and find easier ways, and that's what I try and do in jiu-jitsu. So when I'm rolling with people, even online, when I post a lot of my rolls, a lot of people think that I'm rolling with really bad students. And I'm like, no, these guys are good. They're all black belts. Occasionally it's not a black belt. And most of them are like high level black belts. But I look very relaxed, and I make them look bad because I am constantly trying to master what I'm doing. I just don't really have the desire to compete right now. So people think that I wouldn't be any good or something like that. It's like, I will, and I am, and I know where I'm at, but I just don't feel the need to prove it to anyone right now. When I get a movie made, then I can probably, relax a little bit and come back in and enjoy competing again. But right now my goals are like, I have to get films made. And if I'm trying to compete and do that in jiu-jitsu and this, it's like, I'm definitely going to take away some kind of effort that I could put into movie making, so to speak.
Man, that was very beautifully said. Thank you for breaking all that down. I think some of the things that really stood out to me about what you said is that for you there seems like a very clear path between writing and jiu-jitsu. Like it seems like there's a lot that you've taken from jiu-jitsu to kind of make the foundation for the next stage of your life. And also, I just really want to say, like, it seems like you've got a really good way of thinking about this, where you're not getting it to where it's your entire life, because I think that is where we see people kind of spill over and experience maybe some negative impact from martial arts if they go too extreme. And a lot of times that's what you see. A lot of times if you see people saying like, oh, jiu-jitsu messed me up or ruined my life, it's because they went too extreme and maybe they ruined a relationship or they ruined their body or something like that. So I feel like what you're saying here, I feel like we need more of this, man, like people who are making that crossover and showing that jiu-jitsu really is this kind of foundation for other parts of your life. I feel like that's really important. So
I agree with you a lot.
you.
I think there's a healthy medium of learning anything and doing anything. And you see this in acting as well. You see great actors that go out in there and they take their own lives. And jiu-jitsu people, I know some jiu-jitsu people that have done the same thing, and they get through and they become so obsessed with something. And I'm not saying it's the reason, but one of the reasons is like a lot of people find their whole identity in jiu-jitsu, and that's who they become. They're a jiu-jitsu competitor. And the sad truth is we're all aging, and everything that you have on your body is going to slowly deteriorate at a certain point. And you're going to go from being respected and everything to being forgotten. And that hurts. And I've been there. In 2013, my name was trending in jiu-jitsu. I was this new guy that came out 4 years, started competing, doing really well. And he's doing funny comedy stuff. And this is, something fresh that jiu-jitsu hadn't seen. And then suddenly I leave and I go do other things. And a lot of people did not like that. And I've done this multiple times in different industries, but you get a lot of hate from that. And then suddenly I come back a couple of years later, and the people that would look at me and ask for photos and want to shake my hand, see me and just look away and don't even give a shit about me. And it hurts for sure. My ego is like, oh. And every now and then I'm like, shit, maybe I should have just kept competing because I like that. I like that feeling. And that's something you shouldn't get attached to, but it's something that a lot of people do get attached to. I feel like I was logical enough to understand what it is and see it for what it is and not get attached to it. But also understand that, with whatever I'm doing, that's going to come, and I have to make sure that I don't get addicted to it, because that's like a drug, that appreciation. And when that wears off and you don't have that anymore, it's very easy to start, turning to substance abuse and other things to try and get the same high that you used to get off people respecting and appreciating you. So that's something that's going to happen. And I think that you've got to be careful not to lose yourself in anything and don't identify as things. So when people say to me, like, Kit, what are you? I'm like, I'm just Kit, doing a lot of different things. I'm not even Kit. I'm just a body that's named Kit, doing different things, you know what I mean? Or a mind, whatever it is you care. I don't want to get too, crazy with that, but I've never identified as like a grappler. I've never identified as, as anything really, because I've never felt that I was. I always felt like I'm just me doing different things. And, but there's a lot of people that, they're a grappler. They're a jiu-jitsu guy. Then they become a world champion. I'm a jiu-jitsu world champion, but that's going to fade. And it's always going to happen. You look at all the, greats. Shanji Hibiero was at one stage top of the world and stuff. And I could say his name to a lot of people now, and a lot of people won't know who he is. And it's unfortunate because he did so much for the sport and he's such a great competitor in mine, but it's going to happen to every single one of us. We're going to be forgotten. The sport's going to grow and it's going to evolve and it's going to become a lot bigger than what it is. And Gordon Ryan at the top, right now is on top of that. Okay. In 10, 15 years, are people going to look at him the same way? Most likely not. There'll be another Gordon Ryan and another one and another one, and you're just going to get replaced. And it is what it is. And if you're smart enough, you can use your popularity to, maybe create a career and something that gives you some kind of fulfillment that you can continue on. That could be through coaching. It could be through commentating and stuff like that. Someone like Craig is really good with that kind of stuff. I don't think he's got too many years left of competing. I think he's creating a really good platform to be able to still teach or still entertain. More importantly, I feel like he's an entertainer, and he'll do very well with that. But if you don't have that kind of natural charisma or that foresight, you're going to be left pretty depleted by the end of it, because it will use everything and sometimes leave you with nothing when it comes to that feeling that you're going to lose. That's the downside of it, and I think we see that with everything. So I try not to ever get too attached to that, and it happens. I acted in a big movie called Iron Sky. It was a $32 million movie, and we did the what's it called, the fucking hell, the preview, not the preview, but basically a viewing in Belgium. I know it was in Finland, actually. We did the viewing, and there was like 2,000 people there watching the movie. And when you come out, and they've been looking at your face for 2 hours, and they look at you very differently, and they put you on a pedestal, and it feels good. My ego is like, oh, these guys are coming up asking for my photo, looking at me. Girls are looking at me like I'm hot. Guys wanting to be me. It's like, and you feel that, and you can get addicted to that really quickly, and especially as like a huge celebrity. And you just got to not identify that with that, and just understand it is what it is. It's fake. It's nothing, and it's going to fade, and then you can be good. But I think the most important thing is to find things that deliver value to you in the process, that also offer a result that is very helpful. For example, a big reason why I like teaching jiu-jitsu is I enjoy breaking down jiu-jitsu. I enjoy the problem-solving part. I love when students come to me and ask questions that I have to think about and come up with solutions. And I get satisfaction through coming up with solutions and figuring things out. I also get satisfaction with helping people. But helping people is the way to make money. You can help someone, they will usually pay for it. And if you get really fucking good at helping people, then you can make a lot of money doing that. So it hits everything. The downside is jiu-jitsu is tough on the body. I've got a lot of injuries on my body. I don't walk the same way I would if I didn't have jiu-jitsu. So there's a plus in everything, and you just need to weigh it up and and try and gather, what's this worth? For all the positives I get, is it much better than the negatives, or do you start going this way where it can be, treacherous for people? So it's hard for me to identify with people that do that. And I know most jiu-jitsu, especially top level, they do that. They become so obsessed with it. Most of the time it's because they're learning jiu-jitsu the wrong way, and it takes them so damn long to get good at jiu-jitsu. So if they did, they had to become obsessed with it and make it their whole life anyway. Where if they were training a little bit more like me, they would have got really good and not needed to put much effort into it. So we probably could find more people that have lives outside of jiu-jitsu. But I don't hang out with many jiu-jitsu people, and it's not because I don't like them, because I do like most people. It's just because they have nothing else to talk about other than jiu-jitsu, which I get bored of quite quickly, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me as well, man, honestly. And I found the same. I found that there's a lot of folks who are super, super high level at something. And when you actually meet them and you actually get to hang out with them, most of them are great people. And you really I enjoy the connection. But when you get into the conversation, there's not a whole lot else there. There's not, when you try to ask them about something else other than the thing that you've been talking about, like, oh, hey, this is great, but what else you got going on? It's like, well, nothing. This is it. I've been on the mats. That's about it.
The next competition coming up.
Exactly. And it's crazy, man. And a few things that kind of sparked into my mind when you were talking is a quote from the Buddha. So look at that. You're making people think about the Buddha. Look at that.
That's what I'm here for, bro.
You brought up the Buddha in my head because he said that attachment creates unhappiness. And I found that to be true. And it's kind of like this crazy thing that you hear when you first kind of come to that idea. Like, what do you mean? I mean, I'm very attached to my partner, right? So like if something happened to her, obviously I would be distraught. But I think he's talking more about like what you're saying, this unhealthy attachment, this sort of attachment to things that you don't need. My favorite philosopher, Eliphas Levi, he's got this beautiful poem about desire. And what he basically concludes with at the end of this long poem is that desiring things that you don't need is what creates unhappiness. And I feel like that's kind of what I'm hearing from you, man, is like you're a great example of that sort of thing where, if you have an over excessive attachment to something, it's really just your ego that is attached to that. It's not you, the spirit. It's not Kit, the soul being who is here, who is having this experience. That individual might want to have other experiences, might want to do other things. But I think a lot of times people get stuck, and really it's their egos, like you were saying, that get stuck. They get stuck on this thing of trying to live forever. That's something that I think that really, if you admire these sorts of people who are icons in the sport, like you're talking about, a lot of times the reason they're doing it, and they'll tell you, is for legacy. because they want to live forever, really. I mean, and at the end of the day, if you think about it, not to take this off a philosophical cliff, but it's really just a fear of death, this fear that, you know, one day we're going to die. And it's almost like you feel like you want to continue on. The only way to continue on is all these accolades, all these things. But at the end of it, like you said, man, I mean, people are going to forget about you in 200 years, 300 years. And even if they make you a hero, like look at George Washington, for example, how much of the stuff that people think about George Washington is actually George Washington true? And how much of it is the myth, the propaganda, you know, the story that we create around this icon? Alexander the Great is another one. Like, how much of the stuff you hear about Alexander the Great is actually true? Like, if you went and hung out with Alexander the Great, you probably have a completely different impression of him than if you read the history books. I guess is what I'm saying. So at the end of the day, even if they immortalize you, they still aren't going to immortalize an idea. You know, immortalize the symbol that you become. But you, the person who I'm talking to now, you know, we're here temporary. It's so short.
Yeah. That's a good point. I never really thought about that. And I think I agree with you 100% where it comes to like a fear of death. And I'm in there. I don't want to die. I don't like the idea of dying. And I don't like the idea of not knowing what the hell happens when I do die. You know, and I know I have thoughts, and I know I want certain things to be a reality, but I also know I have no idea. And it's scary. And you're right. I feel like a lot of people will definitely try and leave a legacy in an area that they don't realize will never be left. It'll always be forgotten. And if the sun gets any hotter and it evaporates Earth, where are you then? It's like all that time for suffering, for leaving a legacy, and it is for nothing, you know? So I feel like it's really important to just understand, what are you doing this for and why are you doing this? And I try and approach, and I think it was Socrates said that the key to human excellence is questioning oneself and others. And I try and understand the why to everything, you know. And when I talk to people, I'm always the same. They tell me what they do. I'm always interested in, okay, why? Why do you do that? You're a professional golfer. Like, so why do you do that? I'm curious because I want to know why people do it. People, you know, someone's an alcoholic. Like, why do you do that? Why do you do that? It's super interesting. And if you can understand that, then you can start really taking a lot more control of your own decisions in your own life, I think. And then just understand yourself, why you do certain things. And, you know, I'm lucky now. I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. I don't do any drugs. I don't drink coffee. I basically, the only thing I do, two things: I drink water and I drink kombucha. This is my thing. I eat rather well. You know, I don't have stimulants, and I like it because I don't feel like I need to rely on them. And I get, you know, most of the joy I get is out of food. You know, I get excited when I get hungry again. That's kind of weird. I'm like, yes, it's time to fucking eat. I love eating, you know, I love eating good food and shit like that. But I wouldn't have been able to do all that if I didn't understand why I was doing these things, you know, and I wouldn't be able to have the discipline I do now if I didn't understand why I'm doing what it is I'm doing. And you know, jiu-jitsu was one of the catalysts that gave me a lot of that. So I'm extremely grateful for jiu-jitsu because I personally, jiu-jitsu gave me a hell of a lot more than what it took from me, if that makes sense. And I'm one of the lucky ones where I feel like I don't think there's so many people that get more from jiu-jitsu than what they give. And I don't think most people realize what they give until it's too late.
Man, that's a lot of wisdom right there.
I could be completely wrong as well, so don't write that one down. That's my opinion. I always tell people, like, look, these are my opinions. I don't know. Right. You know, a lot of people give me their scripts to read and to give them notes, and I'll just say, listen, I'm going to give you my exact thoughts and my honesty all the time, but I can't promise you that it's correct. But I promise you that it's honest, and that's all. You know, all I do, and that's all I can do now is say what I think, whether it's right or wrong, whether it resonates with you or not. That's your decision, not mine.
Yeah, and going back to what you said earlier, man, when you started training jiu-jitsu, you kind of wanted to do it yourself. And I feel like that's something that I've heard from you again and again is just kind of this, you know, knowledge that all of the answers are within you. You didn't need to go and find some teacher, some coral belt master who was going to hand to you the secret teachings from the Tiger Scrolls. You were like, man, I'm going to go read those freaking Tiger Scrolls myself. And I feel like with your teaching, man, with your program, that's kind of what I took away from it too. It's like you're giving people a system, a framework to think in, but you're not telling them like, oh, you need to work on 50-50 leg locks or whatever. Yeah. You're saying, here's the concept that I've figured out, and now it's up to you to go and apply it. So,
Yes.
man, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about that. I know that you said in one of the videos I watched, you were talking about how you feel like drilling is basically pointless, is basically useless, which I know a lot of jiu-jitsu masters, in quotation marks, might, throw that notion out the door, be like, what's he talking about? You have to drill. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because I kind of feel the same. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that.
So I think a lot of it is lost in translation when it comes to the beneficial. People always say, "Well, how do you learn jiu-jitsu if you're not practicing or drilling techniques? Because that's how you create muscle memory." And it's like the problem is you're looking at jiu-jitsu the wrong way. You're looking at jiu-jitsu, the progression in jiu-jitsu, as if it's the accumulation of techniques rather than the acquisition of skill and knowledge. That's the first mistake most people make. The second is muscle memory is developed all the time. No matter what you're doing, you're creating muscle memory. And the more you start trying to organize and fabricate and pre-rehearse and pre-shape techniques, the more you're developing unnatural muscle memory that's not realistic and not completely honest. And it's like I could go and get someone, you get two types of people, right? And they've never spoken a word in their life, okay? Could be little babies, right? And one learns by osmosis, by constantly talking to them and talking clearly. Like one of the mistakes people make all the time is talking to their kids like, they're sitting there trying to figure out how to communicate, and they're getting so much false information and thinking, oh, maybe that's a word. That's not a word. You're just like confusing the fucking baby. And I get why people do it. Don't get me wrong, like, because I don't understand that. But I've got a friend, and he talks to his little girl, and he talks to her really clearly and very slowly. And she's like 1-year-old speaking so well. And half the time, I don't know what she's speaking because she's speaking Swedish. But I'm like, were they real words? And sometimes they're not, but they're so clear and crystal. And then I know a couple other kids that are like 2 years old, and they're still like, blah, 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 not knowing anything because, everything they're learning, naturally the brain's learning everything because it wants to do two things, procreate and survive. And you're confusing it by giving it all this false information. The same thing happens in jiu-jitsu when you start pre-shaping all this and you start doing all these techniques. You're trying to skip lines by practicing something that's already been proven to be successful, a technique. But then you don't realize like no technique is foolproof. Every single technique will and can be, can and will be counted, and nothing is going to work all the time. So you're already on the wrong step. The second thing is, what you should be doing is learning through experience. It's so much more valuable to learn through experience than what it is through just practicing something. And there's something that scientists recently figured out, that the amygdala plays a huge part in how deep to store information. And the way it dictates whether you need to store information that you're going to remember for the rest of your life, or whether it's something you need for 30 seconds and then it thinks you need to forget about it, is how emotionally aroused you are. And it's only for survival reasons, because if you're more emotionally aroused, most likely you're in a dangerous situation that your brain thinks, well, we need to learn from this situation to keep us alive in the future. Now, you think about jiu-jitsu, when you're doing free rolling, when you're doing positional live sparring, when people are watching you, when you're competing, you get emotionally, aroused. You get nervous, excited, happy, angry. And all these emotions start triggering in your brain, and you start trying to store more information deeper because it thinks that you are needing this to survive. It thinks you're under attack, and we need to learn as much as we can and store this information deep because of survival reasons. When you go there to training and they show you a technique and you start just drilling it over and over again, your brain just switches off after a couple of times of getting it. And you're sitting there most likely talking to your partner about something else. How was your weekend? What were you doing? And there's no emotional activity or anything. So your brain is telling you, you're telling your brain, I need to remember this. I need to practice this and remember it. And your mind is telling you, we don't need this. This is not important. Let it go and throw it away. You don't need this to survive. This is a waste of our time. Throw it away. So you start confusing your brain. So the reason why I created these programs is because I wanted to force people to learn through trial and error and to start solving their own problems. Most instructionals you get, it's a teacher showing you their techniques and it's telling you exactly how to do things, and then you go and you copy that. What I'm trying not to do is I'm trying not to tell you anything. I'm trying to force you to figure these things out. Even with my own students, where I have a lot of students online where I teach them or in person, and I'll always be like, they'll say, I have a problem with this position. Okay, let's go in this position. Okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to play in half guard and you're going to try and pass right now. And that's all I want you to focus on. And person underneath is just going to defend you and just go and just go and go. And I'll start seeing the problems. And I'll see that he'll go, I got swept. And I go, okay, how did you get swept? And they start thinking all of a sudden like, well, okay, well, I put my hand here and he swept me this way. Why did he sweep you that way? You know, and then like, because I didn't have a post on that side. Okay, so can we go again? And can you make sure that you have a post on that side now? Okay, they go again. He puts a post on that side. And then he gets caught in something else. I go, what happened? Oh, he caught me this. Oh, because you posted there. What happened is you created space in this area here for him to attack that. So can you post there, but also block that space there, as an example? And you start going through these scenarios, and suddenly what they're doing is they're starting to gather so much information that's critical to making decisions in that area, and they're getting experience and understanding. So all the muscle memory is completely honest because it's live. Plus, you're getting it through your own experience. You're nervous, you're excited, you're storing information much deeper, and you're starting to get, you're having fun because you start to take control of your own life. Like you get to the point where, you know what? I can answer every question I have. I have the answers here. And if I think about it enough and I practice it enough, I can be as good as I want to be and I can figure every single problem out. But if you don't have that confidence or that skill, jiu-jitsu is going to be overwhelming for the rest of your career, and you're always going to be searching for new techniques. Okay, I'm stuck here. Can you give me a technique to do from this position here? Yeah, here's a technique. And they practice it. They spend hours and hours practicing it. And then they come in looking more like a choreographed dancer. They look very rigid. They're very predictable. It's complete opposite in what I'm trying to develop in people. I'm trying to get people to be very free-throwing, become very good problem solvers, and learn the way the human body is meant to learn. If I could break down in a very small nutshell, that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to create, I have created a program that allows students the games. I tell them the games to play in which if they spend enough time playing, they will develop, and they develop very quick. I'm telling you, I would give someone 10 minutes, play this game for 10 minutes. Every single time they're like, holy shit. Okay, I see what you're talking about. But it's very confusing. It's very hard for me to articulate that without them actually doing it. I had a student recently. He was under one of the Gracies, I can't remember, for a while, the one that had Metamoris. And he was training for a year under him. He's a brown belt. And he said, look, kid, I've heard this no drilling shit that you've been talking about. Makes no sense to me. But I got you here because I want to see what you're talking about. So I'm like, okay, here we go. Where are you having problems? And this guy was half guard as well. I keep talking about fucking half guard. I said, let's start in half guard and go. And so I gave him an objective. We started in half guard. I just want you to try and take the back. That's all you're trying to do. You're starting in half guard with an underhook, because he kept getting messed up when he'd have the underhook. And we just went over it and over it and over it and over it. And I didn't say shit. I just let him go. And every time he asked a question, I just asked him, can you figure that out? Try and figure it out. If you can't, I'll tell you. He figured out every single question. After half an hour, he turns to me. He's just thinking. He goes, Kit, he goes, I learned more in this last half an hour than I feel like I have in the last 2 years. He goes, I understand now. And it's nothing that I taught him. It's just understanding and allowing yourself the respect that you can solve every single problem as long as you are able to compartmentalize it and make things a little simpler, remove a lot of the variable, a lot of the gray noise, and just look at jiu-jitsu in smaller problems and start finding a way to solve those, and then just make it a little harder and a little harder and a little harder. And I get that's very hard to try and figure out how to do that as a beginner. Even as a coach, most people don't know how to do it. And that's why I'm here, because I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. And I'm going to give you, with my program I have, which is task-based games to rapidly improve your jiu-jitsu, I have over 50 games for people to start playing immediately. And it's been out for 4 or 5 days, and the testimonials already and the feedback has been fantastic, which I'm so happy about. You never know with this kind of stuff, because it's very different to what's on the market right now. And everyone on the market is just teaching, telling you what to do. Where here, I'm trying to give you an exercise that allows you to figure it out yourself, which is, for me, I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. But the feedback's been absolutely phenomenal, and I'm really happy with it. And the best thing about it is when you understand what I'm doing here and you start learning, you're going to get better at learning, but you are also going to start being able to, and I teach this in the product, how to create your own games, which are specifically tailored for where you're at and what style you have. You might be playing with a complete new position, or you want to experiment with a new position, and you'll know how to do that. And an example is what I always tell people: if you want to get good at a certain movement, I would say the first thing I would get you to do, let's take takedowns, for an example. Most people don't like takedowns because it hurts and they get injured. And they go to shoot on someone, they get sprawled on, they lose confidence, or they get thrown, and they're just like, I don't want to do that. And a friend of mine, Spencer, who's got a gym in North Carolina, I believe it is, and he was telling me he's got like a lot of the old guys there that they just don't want to wrestle. Okay, so he got my product and he took a game, a task-based game out of the wrestling segment, and he got them to do it. And they all turned around and they're all like, bro, this is fun. I actually love this. Even one of my students, I have a student right now. He's one of the best riders in Hollywood. He's my mentor for riding. I'm his mentor for jiu-jitsu. He's 47 years old, never wrestled in his life. Okay. And we started wrestling and he wasn't really sure about doing it, but I started with these games. He loves it. He doesn't even want to do jiu-jitsu anymore. He just loves wrestling now. And that's 47 years old. And he's a big boy. Like, you know, that kind of stuff, you can get hurt very quickly, but he's not, because the games are very safe. So one game I would get people to start with, right, is entry attacks. Okay, so let's say I would get them to just attack the entry. Just grab a single leg, grab a double leg, get the back. Don't finish it, and you're not going to get finished on. That way you don't feel like, oh, I'm getting thrown or I'm running the risk. You start loosening up and you start relaxing. You start feeling a lot more, and you know, because you know that there's no risk of you getting hurt. If he gets your single leg, okay, who cares? He lets go. That's the game. You know, and then we could do another game where, you know, people that really want to learn how to do double legs, I get them to start with a double leg, super tight, and I get them to finish that. And what happens is after a while, after, you know, an hour of playing that game, they get so confident that if they get those legs, they're going to get the takedown, and it incentivizes them to then try and figure out ways to get those legs. But if you are getting into wrestling and you are like thinking, well, even if I shoot on the legs, he's going to sprawl, I'm not going to shoot. I'm not even going to waste my time. But if I know that if I get those legs, he's going down, I'm going to find a way to get those legs. And that was tested out with children years ago, which worked really well. So it's almost like you're training backwards. You train the end game. And this could be with it could be a Kimura. Go practice a Kimura for 2 months and just start in a Kimura every single session. Your Kimuras are going to get so damn good that you'll do anything to get to that position. You'll find ways to get to that position because you know that you can do it. But if you don't feel like you can finish a Kimura, why are you ever going to grab a Kimura? You're just going to be like, I don't want to do it. You know, if you don't think you can make money, why the fuck are you ever going to work? If you don't think you can, you know, get fit, why are you ever going to train? If you don't think you could lose weight, why are you ever going to diet? You know, there has to be some kind of belief for most people to even take any step involved into that, unless they're forced into it. So I like trying to build people's confidence in a safe, fun way and get their experience, so then they're more motivated to see, okay, well, now I'm more excited and I'm incentivized to try and make these things happen. And then naturally they get a lot better like that.
Man, just 2 anecdotes to kind of back up what you're saying, because I absolutely love this framework. I've started to do a lot more games with our students here at the Jiu-Jitsu Outlet Academy. And the more I implement it, the more I think like, man, I might just want to switch to all games pretty much, because especially with the kids, it holds their attention so much more and they learn so much faster. Like one of our favorite games that we do at the end of just about every kids class is toe touches. And I got this from wrestling, where basically it's just like, kind of like you're saying with grabbing the double leg, but all you're trying to do is just smack the other person's foot. So it teaches them how to shoot in low for a single leg or a double leg, but it also teaches them how to sprawl, because they're trying to hit the other person's foot, but not get their foot hit, basically. Yep. And man, one of the girls, for instance, I can't freaking shoot on her anymore because she's so good at sprawling. Like we were playing it just last night, and I was like, God dang, she's like, I'm unable to get her feet because she's so good at sprawling. And I never taught him how to sprawl. Like we have yet to go over sprawling in the class, but now she knows how to sprawl.
In Jurassic Park, what's his name says, life will find a way. Like it's so easy. If it's been figured out, trust that anyone can figure it out. You know, it's not rocket science. So you can do that. Go on. Man. Sorry, continue.
Oh, you're good. I was also going to bring up back in college, I trained judo. And one of my judo coaches, he would get together with us every Wednesday and Friday. And we had a really small group that would meet up on those days. And all he would do is have us roll with each other and or do, you know, stand up randori or starting on the ground. That's it. He wouldn't teach a single technique. He was like, all right, we're here, barely warm up, get right into rolling, basically. And he'd start us, and literally we would be rolling for like, I'm not kidding, 10 seconds. And he'd be like, stop, freeze. Okay, put your hand here. It's Like, your hand right now is on his chest. It should be over here. And then he'd reset us how he wanted us. And then he'd be like, all right, go. And then he'd let us go for another 30 seconds. And then someone would make a mistake and he'd be like, freeze everything. And then he'd, see some opportunity like, oh, you're not passing the guard very well. Let's drill that. And then we might hit it like 2 times. He might let us hit it, once or twice. And then it's right back to the live roll. And man, I still remember just about everything he showed me. And I can't say that for most of my other teachers. But because he showed us under the roll conditions, I remember just about everything. And so much so that that's now how I do private lessons. Like, if we do a private lesson, we're probably just going to roll, and I'm just going to stop you every 30 seconds and be like, hey, you're not doing this right. Go ahead and adjust that, and then let's keep going. And man, it works so much better. So I love this, man, because it's like you're trying to apply that framework, but to all of training and just throwing drilling out the water. So you've really inspired me to not only check out your program, but also just to kind of implement that sort of a mentality here with my students. So thank you, bro.
What shows how important and how obvious this conversation is, that take me, for example, I don't drill, haven't drilled yet. I got to white to black belt level, world-class level in 4 years. Take someone that doesn't do any rolls and just does drills, and they will be absolute trash. Okay, I guarantee it'll look weird. It'll look like karate trying to do jiu-jitsu. But what everyone else does, then, and these people, the people that have been claiming that drilling is the reason why they're getting good, they do both. They do drilling and they're doing positional sparring all the time. And the thing that confuses them is they think it's because of the drilling, because what they do is they go, okay, I'm going to practice arm drags. So they drill all these arm drags, and then that they force themselves by discipline to force that into the rolling. And then they actually develop in the rolling because they've forced themselves where you didn't need to do the practice of it. You could have just started with that position. If someone wants to get good at arm drags, I'm like, okay, here, come here. Start with that arm drag position and go from there, go from there, go from there. I'm going to get them so good at knowing when they get that arm, that fishing pole grip, that arm drag, that they can finish it, that they're going to find the most crafty ways of doing it rather than wasting all that time practicing the drilling and all that kind of stuff. Fuck that right off. Just come in here. Let's go straight into it and do it that way. And this is the confusing thing, that people drill a lot is they think it's because of the drills, but it was the drilling that made them focus on it during training and forced them to focus on it where they actually got the real skill set. So they could have taken all that time, which is mostly more of the drilling, and just said, gone, which actually makes you worse because you become rigid and predictable and everything is not completely honest, and we could have started here. Now, if it gets to a point where people say, yeah, but how am I going to learn berimbolos without drilling? It's complicated. If something is too complicated for you to do while rolling or work on it, then you need more experience in that area. And if you play in that area enough, you'll start figuring out ways of doing that. And then we can start looking at that kind of stuff. So someone says to me, I want to learn berimbolo, but I can't practice it. I have to drill it. I'm going, no, you're going to practice De La Hiva, and you're going to practice, breaking their balance on one side. And that's what you're going to do. You get really good at that. Then we're going to teach you how to invert from there. And then you get really good at that. I'm going to get you to start there, and you're going to start trying to take the back from there. And they're going to develop 10 times faster. I really wish I had the time and the effort to take, two groups of students, 10 and 10, that are very similar, and just get one trained by someone that thinks drilling is the best thing in the world. Get me one of those world champions like a Galvold to train them, and I'll do the rest of them without ever practicing a technique. I guarantee my guys will absolutely dominate the other guys. And it has nothing to do with my teaching or anything like that. It's nothing. It's just what they will do with their own brains compared to what you're allowing them to do with their brains. And I just wish I had the time to do that, because if I did, every single person would have this product because they would realize how important it actually is. Or at least, fuck my product, every person would start training like that and teaching like that and find their own methods of teaching like that. That's even better. But I'm telling you, in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think we're going to see much drilling left. And jiu-jitsu is going to explode in terms of how good people are. The only reason I was able to survive, and I still am able to survive at a high level, and I train with top-level guys all the time. The best guys in the world come and I get to train with them. I'm at the same level. The only person I've ever felt that I'm not at the same level is Gordon Ryan. I felt like, okay, he's on a level above, but no one else has ever made me feel that way. I feel like I can compete and I could win against every other person, okay? I could also lose. I'm not saying I'm better than them. I just think I'm that. And the only reason I'm able to do that is because of the way I trained. If everyone else trained the way I was, considering the amount they've trained, which is 5 to 10 times more than me, I wouldn't even be able to survive in this sport. I shouldn't even be able to survive in this sport, but I can because I was one of the only people or one of the few people at the time that was actually training like this. Now we're seeing a lot more people coming up, and you see guys going from, I know Craig was talking about J-Rod from over there. He's like, he doesn't practice anything. He just does it. He just gets good and good and good. And look, he's at a top level in a very short period of time. Yes, he had wrestling experience, which definitely helps a lot. But you're going to find more and more people like this that come into jiu-jitsu, that play these task-based games, and they're going to get really, really good at very fast paces. And anyone that's not training like that is going to be left behind by a landslide. That's my prediction. Plus, I'm going to have a couple movies in 10 years as well. That's another prediction.
I love it.
Oscars.
And man, I feel like you bringing up Gordon Ryan is almost even more validation of what you're talking about, because I haven't been in that training room. I want to get there at some point, but from what I understand, just listening to some of Danaher's interviews, is sounds like they do a lot of that as well. Like, it sounds like they do a lot of starting in a bad position. Like he talks about, for example, Gary Tonin starting with the arm all the way extended out in an arm bar, like starting the roll there, or starting with a fully locked in rear naked choke, and he's going to figure out how to escape. And they talk about doing this kind of stuff. So I feel like they're probably doing a lot of this stuff too. I don't see them just practicing. Or if you watch the B Team YouTube channel, for instance, what are they always doing? Rolling. Like, we don't ever see footage of them hitting an arm bar 50 times in a row. It's just not there. But I mean, maybe they hit that, but it looks like they spend a lot of time just rolling, just getting in some tough rounds. And all the best academies I've ever trained at spend a lot of time rolling and just sparring and figuring things out, like you're saying. So man,
I think this is the thing that's hard.
Yeah.
Most people train like that. Okay. Most of the best people train like what we're talking about, but it's very hard to market and make it money from it. So what most people do is they train a certain way, but they teach a completely different way. I haven't met anyone yet that I'm like, I agree with 100% of what they're saying. And I probably won't meet anyone that says the same thing about me. And this is in all areas of life. I've met Danaher. I've trained with those guys, Giancarlo, Gordon, all amazing. And Danaher, the amount of effort Danaher goes into understanding the minute details is phenomenal. I don't have that attention span. And I think he's doing mostly really good stuff, obviously, with the guys. I don't agree with every single part of the way he trains, and that's just natural. I'm just not going to. I'm going to have small differences, but I feel like he's very much on the same wavelength as me, as well as another guy, Greg Sowers, I think it is, or Saunders. Sorry if I messed his name up. And he takes a much more scientific approach to that, and he's like he's studied a lot of the literature. I don't have the capacity or the patience to be able to do that. I just know from my own experience. But we have very similar approaches to it. He'll call it something else. He'll market something else, is what I do, whatever it is. But it's very much the same idea, and I've spoken to him a lot on it. And there's a lot of people doing the same thing. Hodges said the same shit. He's like, I never practice techniques. I would just go and do positional sparring. Or specific training, I think he might have called it. So most people do it, but it's very hard to market. So most people end up just selling like, oh, what do I do most of the time? What are my my techniques that I seem to land because I know really well, and they just teach that. And it's unfortunate because most people waste their time buying instructionals that are not very beneficial for them. When and that's the hole I'm trying to fill right now, is like an instructional. And I've done it with the Art of Mastering Jiu-Jitsu, and I feel like that was a great step, because what I did is I did a conceptual based approach where I teach all of my favorite ideas and concepts on learning and what I do, thinking in certain areas. The hole that I had in that was I didn't show the exercises for them to start developing themselves in, and that's why I've created this one. So I feel like both of those go together. And I'm very confident that if anyone has those two, they have a solid foundation for them to start becoming a self-developing, problem-solving beast in jiu-jitsu.
Well, Kit, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find these courses if they want to learn more? Like, where can people go?
kitdaletraining.com. That's where all my courses are on there. You'll find them all. And if you want to check out the latest one, it's task-based games to rapidly improve your jiu-jitsu. But kitdaletraining.com. And there's a sale on for another 2 weeks, I believe, an early bird sale for the product. So get on there now before it goes up in price.
Dude, definitely. So you said kitdaletraining.com. I'm pulling it up right now. Man, this is awesome. I'm definitely going to check this out. And hey, if you're listening to this and if you are picking up what Kit is putting down, go check it out. I'll put the links down below So click those links, read the things on the pages, and submit your information if you feel led by the Holy Spirit of Jiu-Jitsu. Thank you, bro, for coming on this show. I really appreciate it. And yeah, let me know anytime you're doing anything. Here to support you.
Thank you, man. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate you, bro.
Appreciate you too.